Do you want the unfiltered answer?
Sure.
We are very self-centered.
Hey, welcome to Ascend the Hill with Jeremy Austill. I'm Jonathan. This is Pastor Jeremy. How's it going?
It's good. It's a good day. It's a little cold in this room, but
Just a little bit. No heat in here, but hopefully it's hot where you're watching it or listening at.
Yes, this big building, it's like you walk into cool fronts from one part of the building or a heat wave, depending on where you are at any given moment. So.
Well, we had a great weekend. We were talking about prayer and walking through our sermon series, We Are. But before we get into that, you enjoy, I say you, me, myself included,
yes,
and a lot of people around the world enjoy movies, and specifically Star Wars.
Yes, the galaxy far, far away.
Far, far away. They have tons of things that are coming out. Since Disney took over, they've been going like fire hosing content from Star Wars, which I love, and also it's so much I can't keep up with, so I'm really behind on all this stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm not.
Yeah.
I am completely and totally caught up with every single thing.
Well, we're just going to focus on the movies today because I think people need to know the definitive list for the ratings on the Star Wars movies.
Okay, so that begs the question, are we talking about the three different trilogies only? Are we adding Rogue One? Are we
my
adding
list is
and Solo?
Yes. In my list, I have Rogue One and Solo added to the 8 or to the 9.
Okay.
So we'll do it quick. We'll do like a 1 through 10.
And we're excluding all the series.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, that's so much. So there's so much stuff.
If you are not a Star Wars fan, please forgive us for nerding out for a minute.
If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put a timestamp so you can just if you don't want this part, you can skip ahead. But if you're listening to it, you just have to.
Well, if you're listening to it on podcast, you can hit the scan forward 30 seconds. So anyway, so do you want me to just start, or do you want to list them all first?
No, well, I'll start, and this is going to be in order of. It was easiest to do in order of release year.
Okay.
So episode 4, 1 through 10.
Episode 4. Oh, so you want to do it that way?
Yes, yeah. I have it by release year, so we'll do whatever year they came out. I can do it in order of how they came out.
How about if I just make my list?
Okay, here we go.
Because I'm like, I don't know where I'd rank 4. I'm going to start from the top.
Okay.
Or should I start from the bottom? Number 10.
Number 10. Here we go. The 10th worst. I guess it'd be 11 because there's 11 here, but because you have the 9, and then you have Solo. And Rogue One. So number 11.
So number 10 for me would be The Last Jedi.
Last Jedi, okay.
So that would have been the second in the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9 for me would be Phantom Menace.
Gotcha.
It's just kind of hokey, cheesy. It's a little kiddish, right?
Yeah.
And it's really slow.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Jedi is just Luke Skywalker is my favorite character, and I feel like they did him a disservice. Now, I watched it and enjoyed it, and in the theaters with Kingston, and walked away going, "That was awesome." And then you have time to think, and you're like,
maybe not."
So number 10 or number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, wait, we're on number 8. My gosh, number 8 is probably going to be. Would The Rise of Skywalker.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that would be number 8. Number 7 would probably be Clone Wars. What's the official title?
Episode 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, episode 2. Was it Clone Wars, or what was the official
title? Attack of the Clones.
Okay, Attack of the Clones.
Same idea.
That would be higher if you could include the Clone Wars series. But anyway, So now I'm at number 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go with The Force Awakens.
Okay.
It was promising. Like, it started out sequel. It was super promising. You had some old, nostalgic characters. You had these 2 new characters and like this unlimited possibility. So it was way superior to the next 2 in that sequel sequence. So now we're at number 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot. We've got Solo. We've got Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
So I would put Solo there. Yeah. I might drop Solo back one. But anyway, number 4. No, Now we're at number 5.
Yes. So
number 5. See, I'm all messed up. Number 5.
Yep.
Revenge of the Sith. Is that what it's called? Number 3?
Yes, episode 3.
Okay, episode 3. Number 4, Rogue One. Number 3, A New Hope. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. Number 1, Return of the Jedi.
Nice. Okay, so you liked episode 6 the most.
Episode 6 was my number 1. And the original trilogy is 1, 2, and 3. Like, to me, that is Star Wars. You know, I'm a kid that grew up in the 80s. And so I had the Star Wars movies when I was young, and the prequels didn't come out until I was basically in my college years.
Yeah.
So, and even after my college years. So it's just kind of like, you know, I had that long a gap with those as the only thing.
Yeah.
So they just stayed with me. But Rogue One was really good. I mean, it to me rivaled the first 3 as far as quality.
Yeah.
And then Solo, I misplaced it because I forgot. Solo would be a little lower. It wasn't. It was fine.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. What was interesting is that you said that the Phantom Menace episode 1 was a little kiddie. Yeah. Which is funny because that's the one me and my brother, when we were being babysat, we would put that on repeat.
Yes.
Just because it is.
Because you were a kid.
Yeah, we're a kid, and you know, you're doing the whole Jedi fight reenactment as it's happening when you're a kid.
Oh yeah,
and fighting over who's Darth Maul and who's Obi-Wan and who's Qui-Gon.
Yeah, and you know, when you're an older Star Wars fan, you know, there's this disconnect from the original trilogies compared to everything else in Star Wars, as far as the Jedi limitations.
Yeah,
you know, like the Jedi all of a sudden can do all this crazy stuff that they couldn't do in the originals, and it's like, I mean, obviously special effects, CGI helps with all of that.
Yeah,
but it does kind of. I just like the archaic version of it a little better.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So for all of you that couldn't care less, I will say this about Star Wars. As a dad, Star Wars has become a centerpiece in my relationship with my son.
Yeah.
And so here's just a, if you made it through this and you didn't fast forward it, here's a nugget for dads.
Yeah.
I grew up playing sports. I mean, I was obsessed with sports.
Yeah.
Any and every sport, I wanted to play it. I wanted to watch it. I mean, I played Little League Baseball, and I bought, like, one of my prized possessions is I would buy, like, the scorekeeping books where you have your lineup and they bat and it's got the baseball diamonds on it. And if you got a single, I mean, so literally after a game, I would pull that book out untouched and remember every at bat and like file it in. I would keep up. So I love sports like crazy. I grew up watching them. And so, of course, you have a son, you have kids, and you envision like their childhood's going to be like yours. I mean, I drove my parents crazy. I'd take a tennis ball and throw it against the front door of the house 8 million times. I'd throw it on the roof, and they'd be in the house in here and go, doo, 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 you know, and I'd catch it. So you think that's going to happen. So we tried sports, like all of them, with our kids, and they just didn't love them.
Yeah.
They didn't love them the way I did. I just didn't care about them. And I had to decide, like, what am I going to do with my kids in that regard? Am I going to keep forcing something that they don't love and make them meet me where I am?
Yeah.
Force them to meet me on my ground, or am I going to find or create ground to meet them on? So I love Star Wars. And so it's like, okay, we're not, the whole, you know, baseball thing's not going great. Basketball's not really the thing. So let me try this.
Yeah.
Like, let me put this in front of them. And it captivated my son. He loved it. And it, like, I hadn't watched a Star Wars movie in years and years and years, you know, and then sat down with him, started watching, and became consumed with it and enjoy it. But like, I enjoy it personally, but way more I enjoy that it's a shared thing between me and him.
Yeah.
And so I just a parenting tip, my big concern was, like, if I force them to meet me on my ground, they're going to think that my love is conditional to them meeting me.
Yeah.
And instead, I want them to know that, like, my love is willing to meet them.
Yeah.
My love is willing to find them where they are. So for me, Star Wars is way bigger than some fantasy galaxy far, far away. Like it is a centerpiece in my parenting, in that it was something that I worked to find, to leverage, to build a bond with my son.
Yeah. And, it reminds me of what we're talking about today about prayer, because the Lord himself did that for us.
Yes.
And does that with prayer, because he shares with us in prayer, because the whole point of the sermon was like the foundational step was that prayer is a moment of communion with God.
Yeah.
Not a checkbox, and not even a thing of, hey, I'm going to move mountains in my prayer today, or I'm going to have this accomplished in my prayer. It's like, no, the communion aspect of it.
Let me in the context of Star Wars and parenting, I go to a galaxy far, far away, so I can sit right beside my son. Like and almost in prayer, like I am praying into the heavens so I can sit right beside my Father.
Yeah.
Like that's if maybe that's cheesy, maybe that's cliche, but for me, like if you're a Star Wars fan, that resonates. Like I am, the whole point of the galaxy far, far away is the proximity of feeling him at my hip, enjoying something together, a togetherness. And prayer is very much the same way. You are speaking out in faith. You are reaching out. Sometimes it feels like across the galaxy. It's like it feels like you're reaching out to this unseen place, this place that you can't quite comprehend. But in the middle of doing that, you are creating a father-son, father-daughter moment between you and the Lord.
Yeah.
And he's right there at your hip. And you are enjoying something, or should be enjoying and delighting in something together. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in the Gospels, it's such a intriguing passage about the Lord's Prayer, because the disciples come to the point of like, Lord, teach us how to pray. How do you pray?
Yeah.
And he goes into the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And you talked about it on Sunday. And it's very interesting that it's like the last half of the Lord's Prayer is the thing that we tend to put as the first half.
Yes.
Which is, I did this wrong. I need this. Please help me with this.
Protect me. Provide for me.
And it's so, like, why does it seem like we so easily forget? Like, the Lord gave us a model for prayer, and this is how he prayed. Jesus, who was God made flesh, and he prayed like this, but why is it so easy for us to flip those two things?
Do you want the unfiltered answer?
Sure.
We are very self-centered.
Hey, there you go. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
When I say we, notice like me is included in we. Like it's the human condition of sin to forget that the world doesn't revolve around us.
Yeah.
And God doesn't revolve around us. Like, he is the sun around which we orbit. It's not the other way around, right? And so in our self-centeredness, in our self-absorption, we just naturally default to what I need, what I want, what's going on in my life. Now, God is really merciful and he's patient, and he was generous in that when Jesus was teaching us how to pray, he incorporated those things into the prayer.
Yeah.
He incorporated our needs, our situation, he wouldn't, not our self-centeredness, so to speak. Like he doesn't validate that, but he incorporates our needs into the prayer. But he strategically, I think, ordered the prayer because it's just way more important that we connect with God than have all of that stuff met.
Yeah.
It's Paul's epiphany in Philippians that like I can have a lot or I can have nothing. I can be starving or I can be full. I can be sick or I can be healthy. But like I'm content because I have the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's that Lord's Prayer is starting there. It's like, hey, like more than your bread, daily bread, more than, an absolution, an absolving of your guilt or your remorse or anything of the sort, more than protection and your life going okay. Like we start with knowing God and he's everything that we need. So, and I think everybody that's listening, when you take a step back, it's just an intense battle, to not be self-centered.
Yeah.
Now we combat it through how we pray. We combat our self-centeredness. We combat our self-centeredness by serving other people. We combat our self-centeredness by humbling ourselves and not demanding everything that we want. We combat our self-centeredness by laying aside some of our preferences for the good of others.
Yeah.
We're constantly combating that the idol of self. That Jason Upton used to sing in a song, "The greatest idol is you and me." Like we're the biggest idol we have. We're not bowing down to the 90-foot tall golden Nebuchadnezzar statue.
Yeah.
Like it's the idol of self. And so, but again, God's patient and he's merciful. I'm not saying this to make you guilt stricken or feel bad. I think it's just something that we should be aware of, that like I have a tendency, even as leading this church, I have to fight through making sure I'm not making decisions that are self-centered.
Yeah.
Not making decisions that are self-gratifying, self-preserving. Like I have to make decisions based on the Lord and what he wants for his church. So I think that's a long way around of saying that's why we tend to default to our needs and our but I think if the part of the reason he wants us to go through the opening stanzas, is of the prayer is so that by the time we get to thinking about our needs and stuff, like it's already rooted in us that God's good.
Yeah.
God's forgiving. God's powerful. That God's at work in the earth. His kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So by the time you start asking for what you need and asking for forgiveness and asking for help and strength and protection from the enemy, you've already established who God is.
Yeah.
And to me, it makes those prayers more faith-filled because like they've come through the gate of knowing God.
Yeah.
Instead of the gate of distress of my situations.
And you brought up an interesting passage about Paul being content in all his trials and everything he's gone through. Do you think that sometimes the struggle that we could have in prayer and the maybe lack of contentment in prayer stems from either that self-centeredness, or sometimes I wonder if wondering out loud if our experience in today's culture, because Paul went through all those things, and he came out on the other side. His faith had been tested in such a way that he was like, "No, I'm content because going through all these things, the Lord is still faithful." Sometimes it's hard for us to relate because we haven't gone through those things. So those same kind of tests of our faith and contentment and prayer aren't the same level. So do you think there's some sort of disconnect there, or there can be?
I think we struggle with contentment in part because maybe you find your validation in other things. Maybe your sense of whether God loves you and is pleased with you is based on how your life's going, but there's something to be said for Paul, gets shipwrecked and doesn't drown.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for he gets bit by a snake and doesn't die.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for having lived through some stuff that it changes your faith, hopefully for the good.
Yeah.
Right. But even in that, you have to see it right. Some people's faith gets shipwrecked because they're so upset that the ship broke.
Yeah.
Instead of like, God, you got me to shore.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't die.
We focus on the ship coming apart, which again comes back to, that prayer without ceasing, that I mentioned in the message. Well, it's wrapped in rejoice in the Lord and give thanks for everything. Right. And so when you give thanks for everything, when you rejoice in any and everything, then you don't get hung up on the ship breaking apart. You're thanking him for the plank that you floated on. You're thanking him for the sand that you eventually made it to. Like, and when you have a thankful posture, when you have a rejoicing posture in life, then you can find God's goodness in different scenarios. Now, it's hard to do that when you lose a loved one.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that when somebody wrongs you, and it's like, how do I find how do I find any good in that? But it's a battle you have to work through and contend for. But yeah, I think Paul's contentment, I think it was earned. I think it was a well-earned contentment.
Yeah.
I don't think it was, there's some stuff that's theoretical. We know this is what I'm supposed to think, but it takes some stuff before we start thinking it,
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not sure how that, I think I kind of went off on a tangent there because I'm not sure how that applies to prayer as much as heart posture, you know? So,
well, and I think that was part of what made me think of it was like when we're praying, at being content, knowing with that first half, Lord, because you're all this, I can rest in that, so that when I bring these other things, it actually is like, okay, you got it. I don't have to.
Right.
It's a load off. Whereas sometimes I feel like even growing up, a lot of my prayers I feel so much weight on my prayers because I'm like, well, it has to be, I have to do this. This has to happen this way or this way.
Expectations.
And then, yeah. And you even mentioned that in the sermon of sometimes we do approach it with misguided expectations and we want to move mountains and we want all these things to happen. And you mentioned the scripture, the earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results as it's working.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes even the achiever can be like, wait, so if I don't see the results, if I don't see what he's saying in that passage, are my prayers even effective?
Am I earnest enough?
Yeah.
Am I righteous enough?
Yeah.
Right. Expectations are tricky.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, we should go into prayer with expectation, with faith, right? But they have to be calibrated to ultimately God knows better than us. And God understands more than we can understand.
Yeah.
And God is working his story in the midst of 8 billion people on the planet right now. And so when you start thinking of it in those terms, like, man, I when I get to a day and I'm pulled in 4 different directions, I can't, I'm frazzled. God is working a plan that's 8 billion people deep, and that's really elementary. And I don't know. I want to even be careful of that because God's just so infinite. But faith has room for multiple paths, right? And I think the same faith that you need to move a mountain is the same kind of faith you need when it feels like a mountain's falling on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, my expectations, and that's what I tried to say in the message. My expectations are that I am heard. The Lord hears me.
Yeah.
The Lord knows me. The Lord is attentive to me. My expectation, my faith, my confidence is that when I reach out to him, like a connection is made, whether I feel it or not, deep calls to deep, so to speak. But I have to let my will, I got to hold on to my will loosely.
Yeah.
Of I want it to go this way. I want it to play out that way. This is the end result I want. I have to hold on to that somewhat loosely. And it comes back to the tension. And this is just rife with tension because, like, if there's something that I know, like if there's sickness, man, I want to attack it with faith that, like, that is going to be healed. If there's something problem going on, I'm going to attack it with faith of, like, that's going to be fixed. That's going to be made right. I'm going to be determined in that. But you kind of have to have this other piece of faith over here that's like, ultimately, I'm going to be good no matter what.
Yeah.
Ultimately, me and God are going to be good. And that gives me more than enough. It is, we've talked about this on the podcast before. It is living with eternity so far at the front of your mind.
Yeah.
That this life is but a vapor. I'm going to spend eternity in his presence, and that is my greater reality. And so in this temporary life, I can live with things going exactly how I want them to, and things not going how I want to. And I can live with both because I have a greater reality out ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here on this microphone acting like I have that 100% locked in.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's something we contend for in our thought life.
Yeah.
So.
And you highlighted an analogy to working out, and it reminded me of something that I'd read or saw a video about, like, when you're setting goals for like working out, sometimes it's better to, instead of setting short-term goals of like, hey, I want to hit this weight or I want to hit this, if you're wanting to be healthy, your goal is to have a healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And within that lifestyle is like, okay, how do I have that goal? How do I accomplish that? Okay, I need to work out, and I'm going to work out like this. And then you set your sub. So it's almost like taking your analogy one more step. It's like, okay, if we want, and to wrap, kind of bring it to a close, if we want to have a lifestyle of health physically, part of that lifestyle of health is working out. In the same way with our spiritual life, we want to have a spiritual hungry life, a spiritually vibrant life. Part of that in that umbrella is prayer. It's something that we do because it's part of our ultimate goal.
Yes, and you said it, like consistency, or you were alluding to consistency. I mentioned the quote, spiritual maturity is the consistent application of elementary things.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wrote about it in my book too. You know, you have to find some sustainability in your prayer life. And I'd laugh years and years ago when Kingston was really little. I started doing P90X. You know, that was kind of a fad for a while. And man, I mean, it was a long ordeal. It was like an hour and a half of working out every day.
Oh,
now,
man.
At that time, I had margin for it. I had some margin in my life for that. But as life has gone on, I don't have that kind of time. And some people were like, you should make time. Well, okay. All right. I'm gonna pray.
Yeah.
I've got a job to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be present to my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got to sleep.
Yeah.
So like I'm going to make time for what's most important. And for me in this season of life, there's no moral on this. Like, this is just my life.
Yeah.
If you work out an hour and a half a day and you got margin for it, man, I wish I could. It'd be great. You know, it's just not where my life is at present. And so I know that's not sustainable for me. So I got to find something that is workable in my current context. And in prayer, a lot of times we feel a lot of guilt because we're not P90Xing it.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of joked about it in the message about like, you know, when you're parenting babies and toddlers, like the thought of sitting down for a long amount of time. Now there is merit in setting the alarm and getting up, but like, I mean, anybody that's got a newborn knows, like, I'm woke up 3 different times in the middle of the night, setting an alarm. What you talking about?
Yeah.
You know? So that's where you get back into the Lord's really gracious and he's really patient, and he actually does know what's going on in our life at a given moment. And so you find what's sustainable. That's why, to me, the prayer without ceasing piece is so important, because I would rather, if you were to give me a choice in your life of, I'm going to have an hour and a half of prayer in the morning, or all day long, there is going to be a running dialogue between me and the Lord.
Yeah.
Just a running communication. Like I'm bringing things to him. I'm praising him. I'm asking things of him. Every day of the week, 365 days a year, I'm going to take the running dialogue over the hour and a half in the morning. Because you can get really religious about your hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like it can become a source of pride.
Yeah.
Oh, I do this. But beyond that, it's more important that God is soaking every single part of your day and every single part of your life. Like, let's not compartmentalize him. And so I come back to the prayer without ceasing. I think that is a worthwhile journey and endeavor that is actually more sustainable.
Yeah.
That isn't doesn't necessitate like a perfect schedule day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my ultimate recommendation it's what I try. What I do is like I have a time set aside in the morning. I pray. I'm in the Word. I'm journaling. I'm sitting with the Lord, and then I'm going to endeavor to pray without ceasing through the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And just to let anybody off the again, like I'm not super Christian. There are mornings that I sleep in, because I'm tired.
Yeah,
like my body needs it. My mind is not sharp. There are times I sleep in. There are times when, right now I'm in a sweet spot with prayer without ceasing. I was telling Michelle this morning, like, I just feel like my communion with the Lord is just quick. It's frequent, but there are other times when it's not as much. That's why I mentioned the alarms. Like there are times when I kind of have to like bring myself back into focus because I got this issue going on. I got that task that I've got to take care of. I've got all this stuff pulling at me. I'm stressed. I'm worried about this over here. I'm frustrated with that over there. And I have all that too. Like, I'm called to lead this church. God put oil on me for it. But I never want to create this this mentality that like I'm here,
right,
and everybody else is here. Like I'm in the middle of it too, and there's an ebb and flow. But I come back to that prayer without ceasing is a thing that I believe every person can develop.
Yeah,
it is a life that every person can create for themselves. And one of the things I was hoping to communicate on Sunday is when you begin to enter the journey of prayer without ceasing, you're not, it's not about flowery language. It's not like it's about this simple, raw, honest, pure reaching out to the Lord just over and over and over and over again through your day.
Yeah.
And it's life-changing when you start working toward that and going toward that journey. And I mentioned that involuntary, voluntary versus involuntary. I mentioned gullies, creating gullies, all that stuff. It stirs me. Like when I catch myself, and I don't always catch myself doing it, but when I catch myself praying in the Spirit, just random moments, when I catch myself singing a song to the Lord or just telling the Lord I love him, when I catch myself asking the Lord, and it didn't go through my mind. Like it wasn't a thought that I filtered, processed, and pushed out.
Yeah.
It was like something that came from here, from my inner man out to the Lord. That fires me up. That excites me so much because it means like I have like crossed over into this like connection with God that is not mechanical.
Yeah.
Like it's spiritual. And so, some people, I mentioned it in the message, some people are like, well, you don't want to get into vain repetition or mindless, whatever. I don't believe you get to the point of randomly, like through the day saying, Lord, I praise you. Lord, I love you. Thank you for this. You don't get to that point unless you very mindfully, like cultivated that.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of mindfulness that got you to that point. I laugh, I think about like when something startles you, when something happens, like when something shocks you, if something unexpected shows up in your life, I want my default to be, oh Lord.
Yeah, not like, other words.
Not other stuff. And not fretting, not panicking, not that stuff. I want my initial response to be, Lord, I want to reach out to you in this. And that's what prayer without ceasing develops. But one thing that I mentioned in the message, or I at least wanted to try to get across, is like, that's not a test you pass or fail.
Right.
In the message, I mentioned that God wills that for us. Like that is what God wants for us. That's what he desires for us, because he knows in that place, we are at a place of vibrancy. We're at a place of communion. We're at a place where we are tapped into the source. It wasn't a command, like you better pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
It was this invitation, this thing that God wants for you because it's so life-giving, it's so good, it's so beautiful. And so, again, which brings me to, it's not a test you pass or fail. It's a journey you take.
Yeah.
Like it's an endeavor that you are determined, like I'm going to go on this path and I'm going to see just how deep I can go.
Yeah.
And I just come back to, this stuff ain't for preachers.
Yeah.
This ain't for pastors. This is for sons and daughters.
Yeah.
God wants to hear your voice. Your voice matters every bit as much as mine. He wants to speak to you every bit as much as he wants to speak to me. He wants to flood your heart with gladness every bit as much as he does mine. Man, when we all stand before the throne, there really is not a hierarchy, positional hierarchy of like there is a relational proximity in the sense that like there's no hierarchy, but I have access to go as close, as near, as consistent, as deep as possible.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what I want to do with my life.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you said, sometimes it's better to pray without ceasing throughout the day than to have that big hour and a half block at the beginning. And sometimes if you're praying without ceasing throughout the day, you might actually cumulatively have more prayer time a day than your block at an hour, 30 minutes in the morning, Well,
at the least, it's the thing that I've said numerous times, like, I don't want to work for God. I want to work with God. I don't want to do ministry for God. I want to do with God. I don't want to run my business for God. I want to run it with God.
Yeah.
I don't want to parent for God. I want to parent with God. And that prayer without ceasing is doing that. You are pulling a witness into your experience.
Yeah.
And it's just altogether different. I don't know how to, and there's nothing wrong with saying, like, if you say like, I'm doing this for the Lord, like there's nothing, man, I'm not over here to like fight over semantics, but it is a mindset of, no, they're like, me and God are in this together deeply, personally, that I feel like that prayer helps us develop.
Yeah.
And one of the big things I wanted to happen Sunday, people that are more seasoned in their faith, people that have been in it a long time, people that already have an established prayer life, Sunday was probably more just, to make sure that we don't get religious about it.
Yeah.
To make sure that we don't get prideful about it, right? But for others in the congregation, I don't want to make, I don't want to, I don't want to show you the mountaintop and say, that's where you should be. Like, I want to bring you to the foot of the mountain and say, hey, this is a good spot right here to get started. Because I think a lot of times we make spiritual disciplines, unreachable, like I don't know.
Almost like a carrot on a stick kind of thing. Like we're almost there, but never quite good enough.
Yeah, a good analogy. And I always want to be mindful that, and I allude to it often. Like, I've followed God my whole life, and what I experience should be different than what somebody that's 5 years in experiences, because I've got 35 years on them.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to put my 35 years on your 5 years.
Right.
And put that as the bar.
Yeah.
What I want to do is invite you into possibilities, but make sure you understand that where you are is where you are, and God's good and he's gracious and he's patient and he's wanting you to go on a long tenured walk with him, and your walk will look different at year 3 than it does year 30.
Yeah.
and the flip side is you got to make sure that by year 30, you don't have a bunch of pride, a bunch of arrogance, a bunch of religion. You want to be that softness and tenderness of when you're 3 years in, that sensitivity, like you want to be all the more when you're 30 years in.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's our challenge, and our takeaway is to today, tomorrow, this week, to try to incorporate the prayer without ceasing mentality instead of saying, well, okay, I prayed this morning, so checkbox. Try communing with the Lord throughout the day and see how it changes your life just on the base level of your relationship with Him. Not necessarily that things change, but that your relationship gets deeper.
Yes. And that's important. The relationship gets deeper. I know we're kind of pushing time at this point. But let's say you're building a friendship with somebody. Let me see if I can say this. Like I had a thought that hit my mind, but I haven't like formulated it. So now I'm about to verbally process.
Mm-hmm.
You're building a friendship with somebody. Like you look up one day and you're deep friends.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you ever really realize when that moment happened in most friendships, right?
Right.
Like it's hard to, you can say, I can see where the friendship initiated. Like I can see where we, the first time we had coffee, I could see like we bonded over this situation. We were on the same team, whatever. We joined a ministry together. We served, as ushers together. Like you could see the beginning of the relationship, but it's way more difficult to measure when the friendship actually became a deep friendship or when it shifted from acquaintance in my life to friend, right?
Yeah.
Those things are tougher to determine. And I think when it comes to us in the Lord, it's similar. Like we can point to when the relationship initiated, we can point to certain markers, but it is kind of hard to tell like when we've crossed over into this deep friendship with each other. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because we want measurables. We want to be able to define the relationship.
Yeah.
We want to be able to see all these clear markers, and we get discouraged instead of just like, let me stay in this friendship.
Yeah.
Let me stay like diligent in this friendship. And I'll look up one day, the Bible, and we're going to talk about the Bible the next couple of weeks. I've spent my whole life in some association with the Bible, but it was just a few short years ago that like I like kind of crossed the threshold into like, I deeply, deeply love this book. And it feels like a cherished old friend. That's just in recent years. Because I've just been with it. And suddenly you look up and realize, well, this is deeper than it used to be.
Yeah.
So you just stay with it. You stay with the relationship and you look up one day and it's like, oh man, this is like, I've hit another level.
Yeah.
Like we found a new depth. Like, this feels different than it did.
Yeah.
And that is just the evolution, the progression of your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, and you hinted at it. We're talking about the Bible Sunday, yeah?
Yeah, so we're shifting to biblically mature in our values this week. I'm going to be preaching from a psalm.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just break down the psalm. And it'll be interesting. Like I've got a map, I've got a plan. We're going to be in this series until Palm Sunday. That'll be the last day of the series. And then the next week will be Easter. But biblically mature and soul healthy, there's going to be a pretty good bit of overlap between the two.
Yeah.
And so I think I've got about 3 weeks that I'm going to be in the ballpark of those two values.
Nice.
And anyway, looking forward to it.
Well, we look forward to seeing you on Sunday. And if you're not able to join us in person, you can watch online, csnlive.org. But regardless, we hope that you incorporate these principles, really important principles, foundational principles of prayer, praying without ceasing, and just going for it and trying it, because you don't have anything to lose if you're going for it,
Yeah.
So anyways, we'll see you Sunday and look for the podcast next week. See y'all.